Senior Teaching Fellow in Cybersecurity. I lead the MSc in Cybersecurity here. I want to thank the Sikh Society who have put on this talk, and also the chaplaincy here who are always very supportive of the Sikh Society's events, and they're very supportive in accommodating this talk today. I have to begin by saying that the views that I express today are my own. They're not the views of the Sikh Society, they're not the views of the chaplain. There may be the views of the Sikh Society, there may be the views of the chaplaincy, but I don't speak on their behalf, and they certainly aren't the views of the University of Warwick. So any death threats should come to me and not to the university or the Sikh Society. Can I ask you to turn off your mobile phones? Please check whether your phone is on, and turn it off, put it on silent, or just turn it off. There will be some interaction throughout the evening. I'll have a few questions I want to ask you, and I encourage your input. And when I agreed to do this talk, and I started to research some of the kind of very thorny issues that I'm going to talk about, it soon became apparent that there is so much for me to cover, there's so much to talk about, and what I'm going to talk about today really is the tip of the iceberg, right? And that the debate and discussion that we are going to begin today really needs to be drawn out over a series of talks, seminars, workshops, right? And I should also add that I did have quite a few communications of people in our community who were asking why I'm talking about this, and why I'm talking about negative things, and how their Gurdwara was so transparent, and je tusi sade account dekhne aajo, almost in a kind of we feel threatened way. And one Singh said, you're not going to uncover anything, just do a kirtan, and everything will be okay. But at the same time, I have had call after call, texts, Facebook messages, emails from people kind of, talking about their own experiences, and it really is a very, very emotive issue. And there are a lot of us who have, we've been irritated by what we see in a Gurdwara. We've been irritated by what we've experienced. Some of us are quite annoyed, and some of us, unfortunately, have been scarred. We bear the scars and the wounds of experiences we've had in Gurdwara. And what that's going to do, unfortunately, is going to put a lot of our Naujawan off ever getting involved in a Gurdwara. And that's a tremendous shame, because we have got so much to give. And we've got, just sitting here today, there's so many skills here. There are guys here who are managing multi-million-pound projects for multinational, international companies, managing staff, right? There are people here, I've been lecturing for 14 years, and I've presented papers, I've written in journals, I've supervised God knows how many students in that time. And the point is that we've got so many skills here, and amongst our Naujawan, that it will be such a shame not to, put part of those towards the running of a Gurdwara. So it really is a shame that some of us have been wounded or scarred so much that we will probably never get involved in a Gurdwara again in our whole lives. This is what I'm going to cover today. I'm going to begin by reminding you of a few incidents, few news stories that took place 3-4 years ago. There is a point to those news stories. I'm then going to proceed to just remind you that, look, you're not the only one who feels this way. You know, let's talk about what the house of God represents, what it's supposed to be. Is it just me that feels this way? Then I'm going to get to a pretty messy part of my talk, where I'm going to talk about actual case studies. You know, some you may already be aware of, some might shock you. I don't apologize, right? You knew what you were getting into, I presume, before you came here today. And then I'm going to talk to you a bit about some of the research that I have done and I am doing, so some of the ongoing research that I'm doing into the accounts of around 240 Gurdwara, which are available to you just as they are to me. I'm going to share some of that data with you today, and also perhaps highlight what more we can get from researching that data, and what more we can discover about what really goes on with your money and, you know, the Sangat's money. And then at the end of the talk, I want to focus on the real purpose of my talk, which is to begin to spark off a debate regarding the future. You know, what might our Gurdwaras look like in 10 years' time or in 15 years' time? That's the structure of my talk. I haven't got long to cover it all, there's a lot to cover. I want to begin with some basic rules. Now, my view is that a lot of the Gurdwara should be named and shamed. That's my personal view. You might not agree with that, right? I believe that Gurdwara, for instance, who haven't submitted any of their accounts to the Charities Commission for the last 5 years should be named and shamed. You know, but in this talk, I'm not going to name any individual or any Gurdwara. All the data I'm going to present to you is all in the public domain. You can download it, you can access it. Yeah, you can see who the Gurdwara are yourself, you can see who the people are yourselves, right? But in this talk, I'm not going to name, I'm not going to name any Gurdwara. I'm not going to name any people either. So that's one of the rules we're going to follow. So if you have any comments to make, any questions, any, if you want to input anything to this, I'd ask you not to name individuals and Gurdwara either. Yeah, this is being filmed. I'm not sure how much of this talk will get through the editing process and actually be televised, but let's make it a bit easier for them by not naming any individuals. I should also add that the work that I do, I work in cybersecurity. I teach cybersecurity. I've been teaching that for around 8 years of my career. And I've also been teaching digital investigation and forensics. And, we have a code of ethics. We have, a sense of values and rules that we have to follow, not just kind of on an informal basis, but also on a formal basis regarding the courts and the legal system and what you are and you aren't allowed to say and so forth, which is the other reason why everything I'm talking about is purely in the public domain. Yeah, it's quite interesting. I mean, we're talking about Gurdwara governance, and Jazz and myself are both in the same area. Jaspal he lives here in Leamington, and he works as an auditor.
Combination, I think.
Combination of security auditing and so forth.
Team of guys as well.
And we've had countless discussions about just the work that we do. And, it's transpired many times that the work that we do is actually Sikhi. Transparency, being honest, following procedures, declaring things. This is the work that we do. It's expected of our profession, right? And what we actually talk about and the work that we do is pretty much what Sikhi teaches. So that's quite interesting. And then the last rule is that with regards to questions, if there are any technical questions regarding something I've said, then ask them then and there. Otherwise, I would rather, if you don't mind, save the questions till the end, and we'll have a discussion then, if that's okay. I just want to begin now to remind you of something that took place in this country 3 years ago, still happening today. Heather Brooke, John Ungold Thomas, the Freedom of Information Act. We can thank them for alerting us all to some of the scandals that took place in the UK. You remember that, right? You know, the MP's expenses scandal. Every day, I think for about 31 days, day after day after day after day, all the expenses of our MPs were being uncovered by the Daily Telegraph. Telegraph staff, Heather Brooks, for instance, was making numerous freedom of information requests to the House of Commons to try to find out how the MPs were spending our money. For around 4 years, the MPs found a way of not having to declare their expenses. But they persevered, and soon, you know, we began to see what your money, what your taxes are being spent on. So there was the minister claiming £45,000 in second home expenses, sold the property. We had a Labour MP spending 22.5 grand on repairs to her husband's house. She had to retire after that came out. Then the best one, the Conservative MP who claimed £1,645 for a floating duck island at his home. And I like the statement he made afterwards. The ducks never liked it anyway. Yeah, so that was interesting. Then let's talk about something that's in the news today. Yeah, if you look at I think it was the Guardian on the front cover. This was again in the news. Bankers' bonuses. Yeah, these are the guys who have apparently brought our economy down onto its knees. Yeah, their bonuses have, you know, made us quite angry. So I want to ask you a question. Just want 2 responses. How did you feel when all this was kicking off? Anyone?
Pretty annoyed.
Annoyed? Anyone else?
I wasn't surprised at all.
You wasn't surprised? No. Okay, so annoyed, not surprised. I don't know whether I was surprised, but I did feel quite angry about all of that. So what's the point of that? Since 2009, our appetite for greed, corruption, the lack of governance and transparency has changed. As a Western society, we don't tolerate this kind of behaviour anymore. Yeah, it's just the pressure that the UK, US public has put on our MPs and our bankers, right, that has brought all this out into the open. We can't tolerate the corruption and excessiveness of the people entrusted with our money and or positions of authority. So my question, and I was thinking about this to myself, I don't want you to answer this yet, but why do we tolerate it in our Gurdwara? Right, we have some answers, we'll perhaps talk about those later on. That then brings me to another question that I've asked myself, and that is, am I the only one who feels this way? You know, am I the only one who feels that the house of God has become corrupted? Right, that you know, the purpose of the house of God is not being served. So I had a look at a few quotes in the Bible. This is from Matthew. And Jesus went into the temple of God and cast out all of them who sold and bought in the temple, overthrew the tables of the money changers and the seats of them that sold doves, and said unto them, It is written, My house shall be called the house of prayer, but ye have made it into a den of thieves. Okay, so let's bring it a bit closer to Sikhi. This is Bhagavad Namdev. 4 Shabds by Bhagavad Namdev in the Guru Granth Sahib. I've got 3 of the quotes here. Share an experience that he had in the mandir. Bhagavad Namdev was of a low jat, and he went to the mandir, khushi de naal, ja de naal. He was really excited about going to the mandir and praying. In fact, Bhakt Namdev did kirtan, right? So he used to do kirtan with the shene, right? Hasta khelat tere dehore aya bhakt kart nama pakar uthaya. I came hasda khelta, I was so excited, to come to the mandir. And main bhakti karda siga, bhakt kart nama pakar uthaya. He was thrown out, he was evicted from the mandir. 3 more quotes, yeah, I've only given 2 here. Sood kar maar uthayo, kahan karo baba beetala. And 3rd quote, these are from 3 separate shabds. There's a 4th one I haven't included. Bhagt kart mere taal shanai, kahe pe karo pukara. That mere taal shanai, jere shene sige, the tallinga shene, that they grabbed my tallinga and they threw them out and they threw me out of the mandir. This is what happened to Bhakt Namdev. Let's just then move on to the whole issue of committees and what our Gurdwara used to be like until kind of the post-Guru era. Following his Udasi's, Guru Nanak Dev retired to Kartarpur. In Kartarpur, we saw one of the first dharmsalas. The Sikhs at that time, probably right up to when the Gurdwara really became established, used to get in. They used to do kirtan in people's houses. Used to get together, Sangat used to get together, they used to do kirtan. The committees only came in well after the post-Guru era, and for a long time, even when the Gurdwaras were established, the people that ran them were selected by the Sangat. People stood down, they felt it was, they felt it was a humbling experience to be called to run the Gurdwara or lead the service or do the ardas and so on. Let's have a look at what's happened in the UK over the last 50, 60 years. And I believe there have been 3 generations of Gurdwara committees. The first generations were the Sevadars who kind of developed our first Gurdwara. They had just arrived, the Sangat in Shepherd's Bush, for instance, in Smethwick High Street. They, the Sangat got together and said, we need to do satsang, we need to be able to do Akhand Paths, and they got together and they purchased a hall, and that's where all our, Sangat, all our kirtans, Akhand Paths used to be. There's a saying, "Pehla sade man pakke hunde sige ta kandaं kachiyan hundiyan sigiyan," right? That our walls were very brittle, but our minds were very strong. We had a sense of community, right? Second generation. So these guys, they were under lots of pressures. Their own houses were mortgaged. They had to pay their own mortgages off. The Gurdwara were quite often, on mortgages, so they were under pressure to pay that off. As time progressed, we became wealthier as a community. The second generation began to accrue a disposable income. Mortgages started to get paid off, and the hall started to get converted into a darbar. So we see the second generation of Gurdwara. The first generation were just halls, church hall, or just a building of some kind. The second generation are the ones, we built the nice Gurdwara. Money became more accessible. And this is when we started to fight for elections. Then that moves on to the third generation, which is a current generation, the 50, 60-year-olds, I would suggest, who are doing very well. They want to now build the extension. There's the nice a community centre they want to build. And in this generation, the Akhand Path and the wedding has become a commodity. Right? This is something we can make money out of, right? £650 in one Gurdwara in the southeast is what it takes to do an Akhand Path. Right? Typically about £1,000 for a wedding, some Gurdwara even more. Add that up, £650 over 52 weeks if you've only got one hall. If you've got 2 or 3 halls, that could be £60,000-70,000 of income just from the Akhand Paths, not including armalle de paise jorane, on the stage, the golak, not including any of that. That could be £60,000 of income coming just from Akhand Bags. Add to that the weddings. Okay, they're not going to have a wedding every week, right? But even if half the weeks of the year there's a wedding, that's quite a significant income that the Gurdwara is getting before they even announce the Gurdwara project. Yeah? We are the fourth generation, right? We're the ones who are going to take those Gurdwara to the next kind of hemisphere. So since the 80s, our Gurdwara have become a base for conflict. This has disenfranchised the youth who have taken their activities outside of the Gurdwara. I've had statements, through Facebook. I can't reproduce them all. I don't need the Gurdwara. The Gurdwara has become a money-grabbing powerhouse, so on and so forth. I can find God at home. And this is what seems to be happening. And I'm an example of that, right? Our Asadiwar every Sunday morning happens in our house. We don't do it in the Gurdwara anymore. Our academy, we teach students Tanti Saj. We've been doing that since about 1998. It's based in a school. We don't do it in the Gurdwara, and we are very unlikely to take that back into a Gurdwara. I know of Gatga Akharas who don't teach in the Gurdwara. There's martial arts groups who teach martial arts, Shastra Vidya, they don't do it in a Gurdwara. I know Punjabi classes who won't teach the Punjabi class in the Gurdwara. Now my worry is that if that trend continues, many of us will never want to take it back into the Gurdwara because it's so, it's so calm, peaceful, it's nice. So koi tang nahi karda, you've got a very straight relationship with the school. They invoice you, you pay for the room charge. No problems, right? So, let's explore how we got to where we are. And this is the messy part, right? Now, my view is, some of you are professionals, and you will agree with me, right, that you can't fix a system until you know what's wrong with the system and where it is wrong. And our adat yasadi komadi, right, that we like to stick our heads in the sand. We just like to ignore it. Someone said to me, right, it's never going to change, right? And then another guy said to me that we just need to wait 10, 15 years because what's going to happen is this generation of 50, 60-year-olds, and marmur janaya, and then, it'll be us in charge. Fair enough, if you want to wait 10, 15 years, you can. I know one Gurdwara where the guy at the top is in his 40s. He's come from India. Anpar, right? Bendu politics. He's going to be around for another 30, 40 years, guys. And there's lots more like him because this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity to make a bit of extra income and jodder and, so on and so forth. So we could stick around, right? Just wait for things to change naturally. Or we could try and push the issue. You decide. I'm not giving you, my view. So this bit's going to be quite messy. I'm going to be referring to some case studies now of cases that have gone into the media, and you might have seen some of them, right? I've anonymized everything, right? But hopefully this will identify where our problems are. And the other horrible thing is that I present to you a fraction, seriously a fraction of the problems that have gone into the media. So I want to begin with just saying that Gurdwara people in positions of authority and respect have rocked the confidence. This is just my statement. You might agree with this, you might not. Have rocked the confidence and trust of this fourth generation of Sikh leaders. You might disagree. Now, there's a common misconception that says that the Sant Gurdwara are okay. There's no problems there. Right? There's no politics there. Shanti utte mildi hai, right? I want to begin by saying that my background is in a Sant Gurdwara. I learnt my Kirtan in a Sant Gurdwara. Every Saturday morning we do Kirtan at Nanaksar Waterloo Road, and that is by far the greatest experience I have in my week. It's the one 20-minute moment in my week that I look forward to every week. Inni shanti utte, right? So I'm not casting all the Sant Gurdwara into the bucket that I'm about to unveil. At least 3 Sant Gurdwara in the UK have been embroiled in court cases, dirty court cases, in the last 10 years. Right? And after the Mahapurush pass away, the committee comes in, and I don't know what their motivations are, I don't want to make assumptions, right? But they see an opportunity, and it gets really dirty. And then you find that the Supreme Court is making decisions about whether a Sant is a Sant. November 2012. Yeah? You're not going to like this one, right? Child abuse, sex abuse scandals only happen in the church, right? Well, I'll give you 2 out of around 6 case studies, right? I'll tell you why I'm mentioning this in a few moments. Yeah, Grantee, somewhere in England, assaulted a 12-year-old girl. 2 grantees, somewhere in England, raped a prostitute. Yeah? Why am I raising this? Because we've got no kind of sense of standards in terms of the people we hire. We don't CRB check anyone. Right? We don't have to declare to the Sangat. We don't have to declare our skeletons to the Sangat. Right? So there's cases of general secretaries or pradhans who have been locked up for GBH or fraud. And we're quite happy for them to run our Gurdwara. Now, you might suggest, and to a degree I do agree with you, that, Malik maaf karta hai, God is forgiving, seva karo, sare thode paap bakshe jange. Fair enough, I agree with that. But let me ask you something else, right? Would you entrust your children in the hands of a tutor who's been done for child abuse? Maybe you would. Malik Bakshadaya, he forgives, he's all forgiving. I probably wouldn't. That's my view. And my point is, it's the Sangat that should decide. But until this is made available to the Sangat, they can't decide. This is from the news. I actually took this from a paper by Gurdwaras Singh, who's a lecturer at the University of Birmingham. This is a paper he wrote, I think it was in 2005, but in the paper he quoted 2 newspapers. Yeah? So we've seen this, yeah? This is so common. Argument between warring factions. This is from a newspaper. At a Sikh Gurdwara temple, somewhere erupted in violence and mayhem yesterday. 1 man was taken to hospital. 2 others were treated at the scene by paramedics after trouble fared at the Gurdwara. Police wearing protective vests recovered 40 weapons inside the Gurdwara, including ceremonial swords, daggers. 20 people arrested. I remember this one really well. Yeah, I wasn't there, but the Singhs have filmed it, right? And they went to the Gurdwara that day. The riot vans everywhere, police dogs, right? And it all kicked off in the Darbar. There was a video clip I was going to show you. It's pretty gruesome. In fact, you can see it on YouTube. Yeah, it's very popular. It's not popular, but a lot of people know about this. Where the Singhs walk into the Darbar and there's a big fight. Different case, again from the newspapers. This is very recent. This was last year, somewhere in the south. This is last year again. So you can see my case studies are all very recent. And I've chosen recent ones because there's too many to choose from, right? If I start going back 10 years, there's many more. So these are all recent case studies, around 3 years old. In the early 90s, this was a famous one. A Midlands Gurdwara had its accounts frozen as a result of continual fighting. So I think it was a Charities Commission froze their accounts, said you're not spending any of this money until you sort out your problems. This is one that I got from a trustee statement. This is on the Charities Commission website. You can download this yourself. Gurdwara, somewhere in northeast. A city somewhere in the northeast has 3 Gurdwara. Northwest, sorry. Has 3 Gurdwara. 2 of them are in dispute. It's an old committee, new committee thing. The new Brani committee have opened their own Gurdwara. They've had a big fallout. New committee's made allegations against them to the Charities Commission. And this is the statement they've made to the Charities Commission. It's on the Charities Commission website. Yeah, they're saying our accounts have been frozen. But ladies satsang jata in the Midlands, microphone fight, microphone stand fight on the stage. General Secretary, very famous General Secretary, done as part of a £37.5 million fraud. Tutor in a multi-£64,000 fraud, teaching your children, doing keep them on your stages. So it's a pretty barren landscape. Yeah, you know, it's when you start delving into this, it's you know, it's not very nice at all, right? So we want to move forward from here, right? And you know, you've got to agree that we've got to change things. This can't go on. I guess I could say that this used to happen in the 90s. It doesn't. These are all very, very new case studies, right? So we have to change things. What are we going to do? They have to change, first of all, with our financial and accounting systems. The people who run our Gurdwara have to become more transparent and open about where your money is going, and we need to have a much bigger say in how that money is being spent. So let me tell you a bit about some of the research that I did. I extracted 119 Gurdwara accounts out of, I think there's around 223 Gurdwara. It's all available in the public domain. The accounts go back to 2007, but I'm getting accounts going back to about 1990. And from these accounts, we were able to identify how many trustees were in each Gurdwara, how many returns were missed, how late returns were returned. I'll explain all that in a few moments. And what we did with that data was put it on a big spreadsheet, which is still being added to, because there's another 120 or so Gurdwara that we still need to add. But in any scientific study, you know, 50% or more is a good representative sample, right? So that'll pass almost any, unless it's a medical trial perhaps, but it'll pass any kind of scientific test. You've got enough data there to get a picture of what's going on. What we have in this the data set are the names, the cities, the charity number, some email addresses, when the Gurdwara was formed, how many trustees they've got, how many male, female trustees, what they've reported back to the Charities Commission, and in terms of their income each year, and what they've reported back in terms of their expenditure. Then in another document each year, we get the actual accounts of how much was spent on employees, how much was spent on, you know, travel and so on and so forth. It's all there on my laptop, and like I say, it's all in the public domain. So let me ask you a question. What do you think? Read the question very carefully. Don't want to behave like a lecturer. This is not supposed to be one of my lectures. But what do you think the accumulated reported income of these 190 Gurdwara were between 2007 and 2012?
500 million.
That's pretty good, that. But it's nowhere near close. You're way ahead of the mark. That's too much. Lower. Remember Bruce Forsyth's Play Your Cards Right? Yeah, lower. One more guess?
10 million.
10 million?
No.
Higher. It's £82,669,163. Right, now, there's a disclaimer attached to that figure, and that is it's reported income, right? You can play your accounts silly, I won't go through that yet, but 4 Gurdwara didn't present any returns at all. They just thought, sod it, we don't report to the Charities Commission, we're not going to give them our returns. In that 5-year period, 4 Gurdwara didn't give anything. So, if you go back to this, these red cells here are where a Gurdwara just didn't bother to return their accounts to the Charities Commission. These red emboldened cells are Gurdwara where they've returned them late. And those late returns go from 10 days to 1,000 plus days, 3 years late, right? These grey boxes are where they don't need to return their accounts because they've just set up, right? So there's an annual, return cycle, and they don't have to return until a certain date. So they're okay, even though they're okay, some of them are still returning quite late. And for these green ones, those accounts aren't available in this set because the Charities Commission only publishes 5 years worth of accounts. So this one, for instance, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and they've also presented 13 quite early, right? So that 2007 one's fallen off the data set. That doesn't mean they haven't returned them, yeah? So when you start looking at that, you start noticing some very interesting, it starts to become very interesting. Out of those 119, 41 Gurdwara missed 76 returns. 117 returns were filed late. And if we take this into account and also what the average of missed returns could be, the total income in that time could be between 200 to 250 million pounds. The net asset value could go beyond £1 billion, right? And to get that, you have to look at the second document, which are the accounts, because they also, the auditor, the accountant rather, puts a value on the accounts of the net value of the Gurdwara. So, and also, the average difference between income and spending for the 89 Gurdwara that were required to present returns and who did present returns was £92,371. That's the difference between what they took in and what they spent. And again, there's that big disclaimer, this is reported income. It is entirely possible, and I don't want to conjecture, assert, or make allegations, but it is entirely possible that what they actually reported to the Charities Commission is not the actual income that came into the Gurdwara. Because a Gurdwara is a very open system, right? You've got computer scientists, I presume, sitting here, or people who've studied system theory. You have closed systems and open systems. A closed system's an engine where it has minimal inputs and outputs. An open system has lots of inputs and outputs. Money comes into the Gurdwara from many different angles. There's the golak, there's the personal transactions where you just £1,000 to the Pradhan, right? There are, what Sangat give to the Granthi to do an Ardas. So there's too many inputs, so there's a lot of scope there for perhaps figures not being reported correctly. 9 Gurdwaras, like I say, out of that data set, for the 89 Gurdwara did not return and 11 were not required to. That's out of the 119 Gurdwara that we looked at. So, can I ask you, so what's the big deal? So what if they don't provide their returns? The Charities Commission seems to say that, you don't have to provide your returns. It's advisable that you do. I'll show you what they say in a moment. So what's the big deal? Any suggestions, Virji?
There's a lack of respect towards the Sangha, the amount of money that they're giving to Gurdwara shows that they don't care and they don't feel that they have to be transparent.
That's very good, yes. It's a lack of respect to the Sangat and the Guru. It's a lack of respect to the Guru as well and the Sangat. It's just kind of, we don't care, we don't have to be transparent. Are there any other problems with that? Anyone?
We don't. It's not just the fact that the lack of respect. It's that we don't know where the money's been stolen. I mean, from my understanding, the only time that Guru Gobind Singh Ji ever imposed capital punishment upon a Sikh was for the crime of stealing from the Guru's wallet.
Yeah.
When all the families of
Masans
were burnt alive, basically, boiled alive.
Yeah.
From what I understand. So that was the only one time. That's the worst crime that
Yeah.
a Sikh could commit, is stealing from the Guru.
Exactly.
Yeah. The Sangat is the Guru, anyone.
Absolutely, that is a very good point. You know what? I hadn't thought of it in that way. In our history, possibly the most, if not the most serious crime was stealing from the Sangat. And the Guru's Golak is the Sangat's Golak. That wasn't the Guru, Guruji wanting to spend money on lavish horses and the top of the range white horses, whatever. That was the Sangat's money. Right? And even at the time of Guru Gobind Singh, it was regarded as the worst offence a Sikh could commit. Well, this is what the Charities Commission says. I'm sorry that my presentation is getting a bit wordy every now and then. But the Register of Charities shows charities that have not submitted as having documents overdue. I've just showed you that. This may affect donations. It doesn't. We don't care. Charities failing to file on time are exposed to a risk of negative publicity. No, they're not, because we don't care. Right? If it was Oxfam, we'd care. Right? If Oxfam were missing their returns and not submitting their returns, we would be jumping up and down. Okay, you might not, but the rest of the British public would be. I mean, I donate to Oxfam every month. I want to know that that money is getting to where it needs to go. And it's not being siphoned, skimmed, kited, laundered, and whatever else. Although there's no statutory deadline, this is the important bit. If charities persistently fail to submit their documents to confirm they are still operating, we may remove them from the Register of Charities. It isn't that easy because they won't just decide to do it. It's only when you start putting the pressure on, right, that the Charities Commission will act. Right, and if we're not batting an eyelid, you've seen it there, right? You've got Gurdwara there who haven't submitted accounts in years. God knows how far back that one goes. Right, that might, once I get the full data set, it might go back 10, 15 years. We don't know how much money has gone into that Gurdwara. If you want to see some, I can show you some in a bit, some of the actual accounts, yeah. They're all on my laptop. To guard that laptop on my way to the car. Right?
What would be interesting, Raj, is if you got some stats from the Charities Commission, how many cases they have that are going on. If you could ever see that, because there's a lot going on and they generally don't like to get involved with Gurdwara.
Yeah, well, it's religious institutions, it's a very sensitive issue, isn't it? The example, for instance, of Islamic charities collecting money for the mujahideen, the jihadis, and so forth. How sensitive was that? Muslims were jumping up and down saying, "How dare you accuse us of this?" And it's a very sensitive issue, but it's got to be driven by you because the very nature of a charity status is that they answer to you, the Sangat. Yeah. Legally answer to you, not just in rhetoric. Yeah. Okay, let's move on. So now I go back to that whole bankers' bonuses and MPs' expenses scandal. We were all wound up about that, right? Calling them, whatever we did call them, putting pressure on them to resign. But we don't care about our Gurdwaras not submitting their accounts, or about the pradhans done for fraud, tutors done for fraud, the stage violence that makes a football riot look like a playground fight. Yeah, we don't really seem to be too bothered about that, it seems. This is a case study of a trustee in the Midlands who's been struggling, pushing to get his Gurdwara to comply. So he's taking his trustee duties very seriously, right? And let me read out his statement. This is just a tiny bit of I call them bange because that's a very traditional kind of word that we like to use when we have problems. Yeah, this is just one of the many bange that he's been involved with his Gurdwara, who won't listen to him. Second generation professional person with a professional job, I became deeply concerned that there were no receipts being shown in our bank accounts. I spoke to Mr. B, the treasurer, to try to get him to comply with the accounting requirements and his duties. When I got nowhere, I then took him to Mr. C, sounding like Reservoir Dogs now, isn't it? I took him to Mr. C, the accountant, who spent a lot of time with Mr. B to explain what his duties as treasurer were and the good practice he should follow. During the course of this conversation, it transpired that Mr. B, the treasurer, was keeping more than £10,000 at home. Mr. C, the accountant, asked him why he was doing this. Mr. B, the treasurer, explained that he was saving the money for a rainy day in case he needed to pay cash to anybody. So what had happened was this big Maya had come into the Gurdwara. The trustee knew it had come in because of an event, but it didn't go into the bank account for 3 months. So he's jumping up and down saying, where's that money? And he had to get the accountant involved. And, and this is one guy on his own trying to push this pack, this is what I called it, pack politics, trying to push all these guys, come back to that in a moment, right? Trying to push all these guys to try and just be transparent in their accounting. Of the 109, sorry, it should be 119, I do apologise. Sorry, 109 are the ones that returned, sorry. The Gurdwara account surveyed, there were 713 male trustees. How many female trustees do you think there were?
20.
20?
Yeah.
Very pessimistic. 50. 67 female trustees out of 713. Let me quickly...
Have they any say?
Sorry?
Have they any say?
It's a very good point. Very, very good point. Let me just show you something in my spreadsheet. There, that column there is the list of trustees for each Gurdwara. This is an interesting one. This Gurdwara has one trustee. It's the Gurdwara that hasn't returned any accounts. Look, that isn't the 119. It goes down, yeah? That spreadsheet goes way down. But that column is the number of female trustees, and there's 67 in that 119. Yeah? So, what's the big deal? Who cares if there's no female trustees, hey? Well, in the Gurdwara, 27 Gurdwara had a female trustee. The female trustees were numbered 3.74 to 1. In only one Gurdwara did the women outnumber the men as trustees. You can probably guess which Gurdwara that is. Yes, it's a shining example, and I think you should name shining examples. That's Bibi Nanaki, which you'd expect. Yeah. In 7, I call them Jat-based Gurdwara, there were no female trustees at all. In fact, that particular group of Gurdwara that I've seen, there are no female trustees. So this data does not reflect who's on the committee, because you don't have to report that back to the Charities Commission. But it's most likely that that is also reflected in the committee of a Gurdwara as well. Right, so why does it matter? Does it bother you? I won't ask you. I don't know about you, but in my house, my wife does all the accounting. She's a much better person at managing the money than I am, right? Probably because she's an accountant, right? But, that kind of hormonal balance of males and females on the governing body of any organization, right? Whether it's a Gurdwara, I mean, for heaven's sake, excuse the pun, it's a Gurdwara supposed to be, we keep going on about equal rights and equality and, Maipa go this and Bibi Nanaki this. But it's not being reflected in our governance structures. We're not letting the BBR either, we're not letting them onto the committee or the list of trustees. Remember, the trustees have a legal duty. They have legal powers. They can force the Gurdwara to do things, right? And it might be because we're not letting them on, or it might be because the BBR just aren't coming forward. They don't want to get involved, perhaps, I don't know. But it's wrong. So this thesis is most likely to be reflected in a management committee where all the decisions are being made. Okay, I'm getting to the end of my talk, and unfortunately for the large part of that talk, it's been quite a negative one, right? I wanted to set out, I suppose, almost on a kind of empirical basis, to prove that there's a problem. You know, we hear we hear all this, it's all conjecture. They're all accusations against the poor Pradhan, right? They're all allegations. None of it's true, right? What I've presented is data which you can't argue with. And what I'm asking people to do is to come forward with these case studies so that we can challenge and test whether that new 7 Series BMW did come out of the Sangat's money. You know, until we prove that, it's all allegations. You know, I'm going to talk, I'm afraid, like a digital forensics expert who's giving testimony in court. I can't make allegations. I can only tell you what I see, right? Until we get that data coming out, we can't challenge any of the grantees or the Apne Pradhans or anyone, but we can certainly challenge them on what we see here. So, things have got to change. We can carry on burying our heads in the ground, right? Or we can start doing things to try and change the governance structures of our Gurdwaras.
Do you think there's a case to challenge Gurdwara and what they're spending money on?
Let's come back to that in a moment. I'll remember that question, yeah? I'll come back to that in a moment. We're going to have to think outside the box. And I said to you right at the beginning, there are too many things to try and resolve. This problem is too big. It's gone on for 40, 50 years. It's become endemic. It's become ingrained in most of our Gurdwara. I say most. There are some shining examples of Gurdwara that are very transparent. You know, Soharod, Nishkam, Sevak Jatha, very transparent, clear, you know. I've not known of any issues there. Apna Nanaksar, Waterloo Road, you know, and there's many others. You know, I'm not casting them all with the same brush, right? But there are too many things to try and sort out. We need to start having this debate, and that transparency in all these systems need to be built into every part of the fabric of a Gurdwara, from the election, selection, you know, one of the Singhs emailed me to say, you know, it should be Panch Pyare who are selected by the committee and the trustees are the governing body. You know, that's the way it should happen, and the trustees change every 2 years, but it's the Panch Pyare who make all the decisions, right? Selection, the Sangat selects. I mean, the Gurdwara will argue, well, that's what they do now. They elect, you know, so they are selecting the committee. But the way the elections are run, you know, I should have to declare, right? To stand on your committee, I should have to declare criminal convictions, points. I should have to declare even points on my license, right? And then you decide, right? If you're okay with that, fair enough, vote for me. If you're not okay with that, don't vote for me, but they should be forced to declare all this. And then during the term, if something happens, they get done for something, right? They should have to come to the Sangat and declare it. Biarisad Sangat, I've got a declaration to make. This is what's happened. You decide whether I'm still worthy of doing the seva. I'm being too idealistic here, perhaps, right? Mediation when things go wrong. Gurdwara in stalemate. Prani committee, Nami committee, just not getting anywhere. We've got no mediation infrastructure. We can't mediate our problems, right? Transparency in every stage of the Gurdwara system, from the hire of staff, the donation, the money. I have a very good friend who's a forensic accountant and another one who works for the insurance industry, the fraud industry. And he did a lecture here last week, sorry. And he was telling us about the days when insurance companies used to collect the insurance premiums at your door. And one particular insurance company used to raise £120 million just from door-to-door collections for their insurance money. They had to design systems so that every single penny of that was accounted for, right? So look at the Gurdwara, all the different, it's an open system, all the different stages that money comes in. You need to look at that. The bidding, this is a very interesting one, right? These guys, Jaspal and his colleagues, they were part of the project team that built the Leamington Warwick Gurdwara. And all professionals, they had a project team responsible for this. So I said, look, shining examples, I am going to mention those, right? And Jaspal was telling me about the bidding process for the tender, the big, how much did it cost, the Gurdwara?
8.87.
8.87 million pounds, yeah. So, those are the days, when the Gurdwara announces, they're building Banania, that's when all the builders start coming in, right? They're part of the Sangat, they're doing account parts, and, they're suddenly part of the Sangat again, right? But these guys had a transparent bidding process, tendering process, yeah? And there was there was a checklist which each builder tendering for the build of that Gurdwara had to tick off. They had to have a certain income. You'll be able to tell more about it than I do. Do you want to just spend just 30 seconds telling us about what you did?
Yeah, there was have many of you been to the Gurdwara in Warwick and Leamington? Yeah, okay, so there was a group of professionals that were appointed, quantity surveyors, mechanical engineers, structural engineers, and architects. So part of the whole process was a document that got put together, that got sent out for these tenders, and that went into construction news. And you had to have a certain criteria, so sustainability, not just to be a one-man band doing one project. You had to have a number of projects that you're working on, so you weren't going to go bust tomorrow. And then out of that, the selection process happened, and we kind of assessed the process really around. So it was many checks and balances throughout the whole process.
Thanks. Now the reason, thank you, Jaspal. The reason why I mentioned that is we've got a very close family friend who was the Pradhan of a Gurdwara until recently, and that Gurdwara had an extension, the big project, and the announcement was made. We're really happy to announce we're going to extend the Gurdwara and so forth. Builders started to turn up, and Sangat was giving money. Literally, people were coming £1,000. You've seen it. Come on, you've been to the Gurdwara when they've announced it. People come and they, it's a kushi aa jandi hai, right? And £1,000, 2,000, 10,000. And he said, I felt very uncomfortable because builders were coming to me and they're saying, "Paji, appa o flana Gurdwara appa kita siga, but tusi sada na de diyo ta appa 40 thanu de devange, right? Ta baki fe jinna hoga kar lavange." And he said, I felt uncomfortable because builder after builder was coming to me, offering me money, if I put his name forward and somehow if I could influence that process. So that has to change, And not only that, right, but the whole, I'm going to be ultra controversial now, but the whole thing about extensions and community centres, right, it really has to be justified. I think a lot of these are a complete waste of Sangat money. Right? I'm sorry, you can disagree. We all have the right to disagree with me, but I think a lot of them are just a complete waste of money. Right? There's community centres built around the UK where the Najwan are not using them. It's nice the Babbe can sit there in the day and they can, have some Sangat of each other and so forth, but they're not serving any purpose. Right? Then, penultimate slide, I think. I've come up with this term. I call it not corporate social responsibility, but Gurdwara social responsibility. Our Gurdwara's social responsibility ends at the walls of the Langar Hall. The view of the Gurdwara is beham. Everyone's welcome. If they need feeding, they can come here and eat. But our Gurdwara social responsibility has to extend beyond that. Right? With the income that I was telling you about, 90 grand per year of reported income, imagine what you could do for the local community. You could may not agree with me, but you could hire 2 full-time, professional, educated Gurdwara managers at around 24k and still have the money for the rainy day, right? Still have the best part of 40 grand left, right, to save in case something goes wrong. You know, Gurdwara managers who are responsible for the smooth running of that Gurdwara, for accounting, for, you know, making sure there are youth projects in place and so on and so forth, right? And there are Singhs, doesn't have to be Singhs, it can be Gore, you know, it can be any background, right? But there are Singhs who would die to do that job. And they would put 200% into it because, one, they're treating it like seva, but, you know, secondly, it is keeping a roof over their head and it's a profession. The one case study I didn't mention was the grantee who sued his Gurdwara for paying below the minimum wage. Did you see that one last year? Yeah? Mm. So, you know, we're paying them a pittance, absolute pittance, to do a world-class service, right?
One Gurdwara had to pay £70,000 recently in expenses and all the expenses from the solicitors and communication grantees.
So that's probably the same one I might be referring to, where the Gurdwara had to, that 90 grand suddenly got eaten up by the court case. Okay, so that's everything I wanted to say. I just want to end by saying, well, what's next? I'm going to give you my email address in a moment. I'd like to help with some of this research, right? You know, there's much more. I have scratched the surface, guys. 40 years worth of corruption, right? Which we don't want to, look, guys, we don't want to tackle this in a confrontational way. We want to say, okay, that's happened, but now we need to move forward and we need to now start operating in a very transparent way, because that's what our Sangat and our society expects, right? But we can only move forward if you've got case studies, examples, and some of you have already done that. Please speak to me, email me, Facebook me, message me, text me, whatever. I would like to run a one-day workshop in the summer on Gurdwara leadership, and I'd like to open it up to 16 to 24-year-olds, you know, perhaps a bit older, where we've got some really meaty case studies. These are all kind of based on real case studies, but, you know, so the Gurdwara gone bad, the Naujawan decide they want to take it over, and the group are all going to come up with, one of them is going to come up with, what's our Gurdwara social responsibility agenda going to be? Are we going to hire a Gurdwara manager? If so, what's the job description? You know, they're going to come up with all the framework, right, for how to run a Gurdwara. Now, what that does to our Naujawans is it equips them with leadership skills, gives them the confidence, and it starts getting them thinking about how our systems should be run. So I'd like to run that in the summer. I need some help. Now, there's only so much I can do on my own, so I need, you know, definitely with something like that, I need some help. I'd like to run it here at Warwick, possibly even 2 years. Maybe we could give accommodation here to everyone that comes. Asadiwar in the morning, Kirtan at night, and in the day, we're sitting in rooms working on real problems and trying to really become closer to what's going to happen tomorrow. You've become the Pradhan, what are you going to do, right? I need help with this research. You know, we need to get more data sets. We need to start inquiring as to why Gurdwara aren't returning their accounts. And in fairness, I have to say, sometimes, you know, Gurdwara just don't know, you know, the guys running it, they don't know what they're supposed to be doing. They need help. That might be, no, I don't mean help in a psychological sense. I mean, genuinely, you know, they didn't know we're supposed to return this, right? Maybe, you know, through this dialogue, we can start having that discussion and helping them. And last but not least, I'd like to repeat this talk in your area and add more and uncover more details and start sharing them in your area, because I want this to just go across the UK and people to become aware. And I have to say this again right at the end, I don't want this to be confrontational. We're not here to wage war against our Gurdwaras or the Pradhans or the committees. We're here to find ways in which we can try, in a Sikh way, in a Jardikala way, to get them to comply, to understand what they need to be doing. That's what we want to do. We want to change the way people think and not have to, resort to any kind of big boy tactics. So, that's everything. Virji, you had a question earlier on. Could you?
Yeah, you sort of touched on it anyway. The question was, should we challenge Gurdwara committees where we spend the money? Now you said you think halls are a big waste of money. Well, I agree.
Yeah.
There's not as much focus on learning,
Gee.
Which is what a sec should be doing.
Hanji. Yes.
The basics I'm talking about.
Gee, my sister was talking to me at the weekend, and she was telling me, she teaches at a private school, and she was saying, I'd like to go on a Saturday and teach to tutors. We've got this skill set, guys. We've got teachers, lecturers, who can teach at a professional level, but we're using antiquated systems to teach our children Punjabi. All respect to the Punjabi teachers who give that time. Right, my children have been to Punjabi school. They hate going there. We literally have to drag them, to the Punjabi school, right? But we've got students from the academy, Benji here, Baji here, Harminder here, and we've got 6, 7, 8-year-olds who come every week, 7 o'clock in the morning, and they love it. It's just hiring and using the best systems to teach, and they don't do enough of that. Right, I totally agree with you. And in terms of what we need to do with Gurdwara is, you need the tools. And those tools are the documents and the accounts that are in the public domain. And we need to be asking the Gurdwara, what have they spent the money on? And so on and so forth. So that's a discussion for another day. Any other questions or comments? Hanji.
Do they understand what governance is first?
I don't think...
Do people understand here what governance is?
Do you understand what governance is, guys? What does transparency mean to you? You're all very shy here. Look, you won't get picked off by one of the committees, I can assure you, right? Don't turn the camera when someone asks a question. All right, I'm the only one, probably just Paul as well, who are going to get picked off. But what is transparency to you? Do you understand what governance is? Do you?
It's making everything accessible to people, and like water, it's transparent. You can see straight through it.
Yeah.
So accounting policies, finances, it's all transparent.
It's being able on a Sunday to go to the Gurdwara and say, I want to see the accounts. I want to see the receipts. I want to see the book that has all the invoices in there. When the money is counted, I want to be able to just walk along with you guys and see that went into the account, it's on the balance sheets, on the bank statements. It's transparency. It's you being able to audit the whole process, account for every penny that goes into that Gurdwara, and not have treasurers who are stocking up 10 grand for rainy day money. Right, Virji at the back?
I think a big part of the problem is that our Gurdwaras now have, instead of being, they're very open to the Sunday, anyone can go, not that if you want to get involved, they're private member clubs. A lot of them, my local Gurdwara, some of your figures, that's how much they make in a month, where I'm from. And if you want to get involved, if you want to ask to see the accounts, you have to be a member of the Gurdwara. It's not enough that you're a member of the fund, you have to be a member of the Gurdwara, you have to pay your dues. It's a very closed system. You can only become a member at 2 months before the election, so you're open for a month. There's a lot of hindrance in there for you to actually communicate with the community, communicate with the Gurdwara. And I think a lot of the reason why the problems got this bad is because personally I never would have thought that they would be doing stuff like this. You just never think that the Gurdwara would be behaving in this way.
Yeah, it's the biggest hypocrisy in our term, isn't it? It's almost a kind of contradiction in terms. Gurdwara, and this is what goes on. Virji?
I think a lot of what you've covered today obviously has been about corruption, so i.e. financial mismanagement or financial, lack of transparency. The other thing that is interesting, I don't know if you've looked upon this, but obviously you may have generally, but in specific I'm wondering whether we could do data upon that, because about how the Gurdwaras they actually do what they said they would. So what I mean by that is each Gurdwara committee tends to publish what they plan to do.
The manifesto.
And they also, all of them have a constitution. Now what's interesting is those constitutions and those manifestos aren't really available either.
Yes. Well, no, the constitution is. It's on the Charities Commission website.
It's not always. So I made that clear.
If it's registered as a charity,
it's not. It doesn't have to be.
Okay.
The charity doesn't have to publish its constitution on the charity website.
Okay.
So just want to make that clear because a lot of Gurdwara tend not to publish those documents. Some of them do, like for example, especially in my area, some of the Gurdwara are very clear about publishing the whole constitution on there. You can go up there. In fact, I'd say even further, you don't even know who's on the committee.
Yes.
For a lot of Gurdwara, you couldn't go in there and see who's running that Gurdwara. So not only is there financial, mismanagement or lack of transparency, but actually you don't even know who to blame.
Yes.
You don't even know who to get hold of. So part of this problem comes back from where you've got power, where you've got no responsibility.
Jaspal?
I agree with you. There's covered a couple of key areas around roles and responsibilities. You don't have to you go and work for a company, you've got a role and responsibility.
Yeah.
Really? Everyone's got a duty and they know what they've got to do and how they've got to do it. They all know what they should be doing and how to do it, but they keep failing us. Now this is only from experience that I've gained of being a committee member, being Assistant General Secretary, but also having to resign because my own ethics, my own values are being challenged. Now I do a lot of work within government, I'm vetted. So what it means for me is if I'm associating with people that are not operating in the right manner, I have to walk away from that. Because it's going to affect my career, my own values, my honesty, my integrity, all the things we talk about. But action, they talk about it, but they don't do it. Yeah, so that's a key point. Now, my day job is I do governance, risk and compliance, day in, day out, up and down the country, with many organisations. I tell them how to operate effectively. And when I'm telling my own people, my own PR with my own community, they don't listen.
They laugh at.
Yeah, so it's people laughing, but there's a failure. And it upsets you as well. There's a failure. But the thing is, you still have to try and get involved, still be part of the whole process. But it's a transformational change. And that transformational change it's only by together, all of us, that we can make the difference.
Two comments. Is Virji waiting there, then Dr. Gurdwara Singh?
Yeah, as Barji spoke about the constitution, I'm not going to say what town I'm from, but the Gurdwara in our town has actually changed their constitution.
With consultation with the Sangat?
I don't know. I doubt it.
Yeah.
But they will make it difficult to oust the writer. So that's happening as well.
Yeah, the constitution is crucial because it can make it difficult, as you say, to oust or kick out the committee. Dr. Gurdwara Singh?
I'd like to give my congratulations on a very brave talk.
Thank you.
I think I've been trying to say these things for 4 years now and I didn't have the courage. So thanks very much for giving me courage. And I think all of us need to speak truth now. I think for too long we've kind of gone with a group or toward a party line. I think that's part of the problem. We make ourselves mute, we silence ourselves because we don't want to upset our friends or relatives. So I think that's one of the problems. But I think we also need to be wary here, we're all kind of educated people here within the university. And, educated people aren't necessarily innocent in this process. In fact, Gurbani ki padhya hove gunegar ta ommi saap na mariye. Ommi hunde sa jehde anpad hunde sant hunde Hindu hunde si om Brahman hunde si om keh ke saha lende sige. And they said that the educated one is the craft. In fact, to be corrupt, you have to be educated. Like when Muskin Sahib ne katha ki thi, the people who do the most damage in the world are the educated people, because they can influence other people. Now I'm kind of arguing against myself as an intellectual, but so the first thing, it's not about whether you're educated or not educated. That's the first thing, because morals and ethics. And if you look at the banking, I think you start with the banking crisis. It was the educated people who destroyed the economy of the world. Yeah. So that's the first thing. Number two, I think a large proportion of the people who do seva in the committees of the Gurdwaras are very honest and very decent people. A large proportion. But that's part of the problem, because they are honest and decent. So what happens is the few crafty, educated ones manipulate their sharda. Certainly this is what happened in Leamington. What we had was, sheep being led by donkeys, being led by dangerous individuals, yeah? Let's be honest. And that's the problem. So I think that it's not a problem of education, I think it's certainly a problem of ethics, but it's a problem of educating the Sangat as much as educating the leaders, because if the Sangat were educated, they wouldn't support these corrupt individuals, because remember, every 2 years they do pull the Sangat in to elect them, and that's what happened in Leamington. Everybody knew what was going to happen, so we need to be very kind of forensic in the way we do these things. I think the other thing is, I think that we need to see this problem not just for Sikhs as well. Again, you talked about the banking crisis, and you look at the Roman Catholic Church. If you talk about sexual abuse, then look at the Roman Catholic, it's destroying the church. And we haven't even begun to address this question of abuse within Gurdwaras, in deras and places like that. So we need to develop a language, I think, because we've got a language here. Why don't people talk about those things? Because they haven't got a discourse in the Gurdwara. It's the discourse either of the Babas, or the discourse of the old politicians, trust me, trust me, trust me. So I think we need to develop a discourse with training, education, courage, but we have to be the change that we want, and that's the biggest thing. I said that in Parliament. I said, each and every one of us now have got to be these new people. We can't simply wait for somebody else to make the change, and that's the real crucial thing. And I think it's possible, because I think we are seeing now a generation of young people who say, these are our Gurdwaras, my grandfather made this Gurdwara, my father made this Gurdwara, and we have to now take them forward. So I see lots of positives, but we also have to be wary of unscrupulous individuals who themselves will manipulate young people, give them a fundamentalist agenda because that's what young people kind of thrive on, but actually exploiting them. There are many people who come from India who, there they don't wear the bana, here they put the bana on straight away. They're not impressionable young people. They draw them in, and then 5 years down the line they sold them off, and they've got their BMWs and their Mercedes cars. Let's be honest, yeah?
Thank you, guys. That's very insightful. I have to say, me and my close friend were talking about this on the way in, met him in the car park and walked down. And he said, you're going to ruffle a few feathers. Now there's going to be Gurdwara committees who are going to be totally cheesed off with, all that, right? It's embarrassing, right? But you've got to have the courage to challenge, right, in the right way. Did you see?
I'm involved with a group which was based at Gurdwara. Just before we left, we come to know that the Pradhan of that Gurdwara was applying for numerous amounts of large sums of money under our group's name, which we had absolutely no idea of. They used the name of the group to get the money. They had the money, no idea where it went, on more than 2 occasions. All I know.
Sorry, so I agree with everything that's been said today. I think what we've done is kind of whistleblow on what the flaws are and what the problems are. I think what we need to do now is take a solution-based approach, which Raji said earlier on anyway. We need to say, okay, what are we going to do about this? And I agree with anyone that's talking here, everyone that's said anything. I've got lots to say about each topic because I'm totally in agreement with you all. I think the club culture with Gurdwara, Raji said earlier on, we asked you, well, this is our club, and if you want to get in, everyone's looked upon as an infiltrator. There's a hereditary kind of thing going on where, my granddad was a Pradhan, so it's in our family, we're not going to let anyone else in, and if you are, you have to be related or married in. It's a ridiculous system. I think transparency, going to what Raji said, is very, very important in governance as well. In the industry, I work in IT, and we have a RACI schedule for everyone, which is responsibility, who's responsible, who's accountable, who's consulted, and who's informed. So the Sangat's informed, consulted, who are the people that actually make the decisions, yeah? Again, it should be pointed to the Sangat and in compliance with them. Who's responsible for it? So if it all goes pear-shaped, who's responsible? Someone's got to say, guys, I made a mistake, you know, this project hasn't gone, and it is a project, everything you do is should be looked at upon professionally, whether it's, you know, like you say, unparalleled when they're doing it, and accountable. Somebody should be accountable, and the Gurdwara as a whole should be an entity which is accountable for everything. So there's a few things here, and like you said, you know, like there are a lot of good people in the faith, and I think the guys that clean the toilets, change light bulbs, yeah, that we take for granted, you know, renew the soap stock where the sink is, or take the dirty towels down. These are the unsung heroes, right, of the pond. Where everywhere else you've got these people that turn up on a Sunday morning with this three-piece suit on, Mercedes parked outside, been unemployed for 35 years, but somehow he's got the money, and you know, has the speech, and it's his time to shine in the sun, or her time. It's usually his
probably
time. Sorry?
It's probably a contribution.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So, yeah, so the only thing, we've got some good qualities. There are some solutions though, right? And I don't want to go into this to take over the whole thing, but there are some solutions. I personally believe that the Gurdwara could very easily become a cashless system. Yeah? So we don't trust. What we're saying here is like we've lost faith with this. There's a lot of corruption and this and the other. I'm not saying we're going to go into there with our credit card and swipe a PDF and, you know, sorry, a PDA and kind of like put our pins in and stuff. But the Gorluk itself is where the money is, right? Let's face it, that's where the money is actually donated. Okay. I think that the system of cash should be managed and taken over by the banks, like Securicor. So when you go to your bank and they take their money to their head office, it's done by Securicor. You don't have to follow them, like I said, you don't have to follow them from, you know, is it going there, is it not? And you're paying for that managed service, right? So that's a managed service, and all these other bits and pieces where Gyani are getting money for a sirpa or doing a das. I think personally, and I might ruffle some feathers by saying this, the fact that we ask for a receipt, yeah, when we're doing a das or prashad at the Gurdwara, and ask for our names to be mentioned in the ardas, we're actually proving that our Guru isn't Jani Jan, that he doesn't know. He has to be told, right, to accept it. And the whole practice of that is ridiculous, in my view. Okay, this whole receipt system there, here you go, Baji. And you can actually go back and say, you know what, you forgot my name, you didn't mention me, you know, in the ardas. I mean, and there's an opposite argument in that, well, the receipt system is because the Gurdwara doesn't do away with the money, but looking at what we've identified here today, how relevant is that? So there's lots of different things we could do to remedy stuff. I mean, we're known for taking out each other's bug off in Gurdwara. We're known for all the walls and all the fights that we have. It's very easy to get identified for that. But there's a lot of homeless shelters, and we're at the stage in the UK alone where there's food refuges. Okay, so people, normal working families, just don't have the food. What we could do to give ourselves a good name in this country it's all there. It's not like we don't have to create this. Okay.
This comes back to the Gurdwara social responsibilities.
Social responsibilities, yeah.
Where even though we're living in a G8 country, there are people starving in this country.
Yeah.
Right? And thanks to the bankers, we've got people whose benefits have been cut. You know, these are honest people who would like to work, not benefit cheats, but there's people who are totally out of money. They're living below the breadline, right? And another sayings in London, I mean, you may know more about it. They go out and they feed.
SWAT, yeah.
And they SWAT.
SWAT. Sikh Welfare and Awareness Team.
They go out and they feed. You know, they get together, make roti pizzas, whatever it is, and they go out and they feed the hungry. And there was a saying he told me that they gave roti out, food out, and one of the homeless guys said, "So aren't you going to give me the spiel?" He said, "What spiel?" He said, "Well, when the Christians and the Muslims come and do it, they give me the spiel, you know, God is great, you know, and so forth." He goes, "No, I'm not going to give you any spiel. Our seva is just to give you the food and go." What about all the Gurdwara that are situated in downtrodden, run-down areas? What could you do for that area to build that trust, friendship, relationship with all the community in that area, right? I'd rather that 90, personally, you don't have to agree, but I'd rather that £90,000, a fraction of it, £10,000, 10%, £9,000 of it is spent in the area, fixing up the area, or there's a youth centre, you know, which kids go to, there's a community centre, there's a new creche that needs to be done up, you know, the kids go there. I'd rather it's spent on that, guys. I don't need the extension. Right. Sorry, someone was
I just wanted to speak because there is a big desire in the Sunday to do these things. When on the signature, we went to have the homeless campaign, and when we had the pictures of the homeless people sleeping on the canals, we had a phenomenal response. And not just from young people, in fact the response from young people was pretty pathetic. It was the response from the oldies. So the Guru's blessings there, but I think part of the problem with Gurdwara is they don't themselves have a vision, they don't show any leadership. And you know, any company, any business or any university to survive, it has to have a vision, it has to have a change model. And you talked about the local community. I think that's probably the biggest challenge, because most people who attend Gurdwaras don't live in the vicinity of the Gurdwaras. They used to in the 60s when they could only afford the housing, because most Gurdwaras are in inner city, you know, kind of cheap areas. Or and other people living there, migrants, and we moved out into kind of leafy suburbs. So there's a big problem there. We're disconnected with the geographical, physical community where the Gurdwara is. Now the question for us is, do we see the vision of the Gurdwara to serve the people around the Gurdwara, in which case we have to begin to do that and ultimately accept that they may well take over the Gurdwara? Or are we saying, no, these are just kind of like satellites for us, where we go in on a Sunday, you know, in our Sunday best, and then we go back home? And these are fundamental challenges, I think.
I mean, you mentioned something very interesting before I got to this file. The homeless campaign wasn't led by any particular Gurdwara, was it? This is again Seva that's gone out of the Gurdwara. And I mentioned that at the start of my talk, right? Sikh Helpline. Have you all heard of the Sikh Helpline? Yeah. I spoke to Gyaniji, who runs it, right? I met them on Sunday. And I asked a silly question. I said, is there a Gurdwara backing you? Because I remember you used to be based at such and such Gurdwara. He said, no. We're no longer based at that Gurdwara. We're in an office. The letting agent has given us the upstairs office. Or sari seva hon bahar chala gayi, out of the Gurdwara. It shouldn't be like that, guys. That community centre, you know, that £1 million community centre should have the offices to house these initiatives and projects, right?
I think, I mean, from my personal experience, it's something that I'm obviously passionate about. I chose with Basic Sikhi to start it just, you know, one of these cameras on a laptop in my office, just making videos. But what I would say is, instead of focusing upon building, a lot of people said, why don't you make another Gurdwara? You got the idea, why don't you make another Gurdwara? I think that what we need to do is actually say, stop building funds. Building funds are a big problem. We need to start fundamentals building. Yeah? So that's just like flip it. So what I try to do, and I try to get other people to do, is look, either use resources which you can, like for example, rent out a place and do that, or butt your head against them as long as you can. Yeah, get thick skin and try and get a spot. So we got a slot on Sunday evening. No one comes to Gurdwara Sunday evening 6 p.m. right? And that's what they gave us, one slot Sunday evening at Park Avenue. But actually now, but there's like 400 people there coming every Sunday, and those people only come on a Sunday evening. You don't see them during the week that much. They just come on the Sunday evening, listen to the Katha, and then they go. That's their English bit of Katha, of Gurbani. And it's just, I would say that every Sikh here, try and do something for your community. And no matter, regardless of how much you think globally we should be doing, etc., like you were saying, go back to being local. So if you can do a program in your Gurdwara every Sunday, even if it's like once a week, you turn up and say, look, I could explain the Hukamnama in English. Yeah? Every person needs to take that responsibility on themselves. You can't just say, oh, well, Flana Banda's going to come from America, come here, and this thing's going to come and do a talk for 2 weeks. Me and Shimshay were talking on the way up here. You can't just do it that way, that we have a little burst of activity from one person who goes round, or Australia is going to call Sukha Singh over to do a bit of a talk, and then he's going to go back, or, you know, we're going to have the Seek to Inspire tour. In every little Gurdwara, every person who's got this roop of Guru Gobind Singh Ji needs to do what Guru Gobind Singh Ji said, which is Gyan Shabad Guru Sune Sunai. Listen to it, right? Understand it yourself. and then make sure you tell everybody else about it. So firstly, we need to get out the gyan of the Gurbani, and I think that's what I'm finding from going to universities, is we are like way behind. Like if you would, like if we walked around this room now and turn around this corner and go around there, you'll see a Jewish prayer room and a chaplaincy full time. You'll see a Catholic chaplaincy and a prayer room. You will see an Islamic room around the corner.
No, a hall.
A separate hall just for the Islamic students. You will not see anything about the Gurdwara. You won't even see a poster up here, right? We are trailing behind, and the responsibility, unfortunately, comes upon us. You can't just say, yes, in one way you can blame the leaders, because those are the guys that put themselves in charge. Yeah, they stepped up and they said, I want to be Pardhan. I want to be. So they put themselves forward, but at the same time, every single person that puts on a pug and has this roop is taking on his face, not our face. We look like what we used to look like before. Now we look like him. Yeah. So we got to step up. Yeah. To be like him. And if that means that in your area, people who look like this are very judgmental, that means you get up and you be the non-judgmental one. Yeah. If everybody else is pushing people away, you be the one that brings people in. Because that's the other thing people say, you know, about our roop. You know, this Guru's roop, unfortunately, is not very friendly at the moment. Yeah. One of the big problems we've got in our pant, people don't want to talk to people like me. Yeah. They think we're going to judge you. They think if you turn up to somebody like this and you've, you know, trimmed beard, the first thing he's going to say to you is, sort this out. Yeah. I wanted to ask here, because there's loads of people here that have obviously heard this talk. There's something that I've been thinking about for a while. What are people's views about a Gurdwara not being run by elected committee members, but going back to how we might think back in the day, there wasn't an election and every single person got to vote, but that people who were manne hoye, let's say the Panj Pyare, yeah, people who were manne hoye were then taken out and said, you run the Gurdwara, you should be in the Panj Pyare. How do people feel about that? Because when I've raised this topic, people are coming with different ideas that, you know, that's not fair, everybody should have a say, versus actually, well, maybe not everybody should have a say, because a lot of people might not know what should happen. Like a lot of people don't even know like what Japji Sahib says, so maybe they shouldn't be allowed to express their views on how the Gurdwara should be run. Maybe they should just learn what it says first. Any opinions people have?
Yes, the elections are the root cause of the big problem.
Hanji, we just elaborate. What do you think? Why do you think that?
If there are no election, there are only selection. The good people are selected right from the public, because the congregation knows everybody. So they should be brought forward to run the Gurdwara. Because since the 1925 Gurdwara Act, that made the problem. Look what's happening in our historical Gurdwaras as well, not to talk about the local Gurdwaras. So elections gave actually promotion to the groupism in the Gurdwaras.
Yeah.
In many Gurdwaras, there are only two groups. They take turns, one by one, like Tories and Labour.
It's an adversarial system.
Yeah.
It's not joint. You have to have an adversary.
So that's the main problem.
I think.
Hanji.
Yeah, I don't think we should be focusing on who should be running the Gurdwara, it's what the Gurdwara should be doing.
Okay. Very good point.
You know, Seva, Simran, and learning. These are fundamentals of our faith. Yet the Gurdwara doesn't focus on these things. It will focus on profit, building the wedding hall.
I think Bhai Sahib he said it should be project based. That's what you were saying. And it seems like no one's got responsibility. And at one point, that's something that I felt for a long time. Power versus responsibility. Power means I'm in charge, I get to make the decisions. Responsibility means you're in charge for it not working. Yeah. So in fact, somebody could be called the person to blame for langar going wrong. No one wants to take on responsibility. You won't find people fighting to take on responsibility. Yeah. But you will find people fighting to take over a position of power. It's just something to think about. If you flip the titles, you could actually flip a lot of the meaning of what that job entails.
I think there's a couple of threads about the whole thing. When it comes to how the system has to change, it's about education, back to basics. We've forgotten those things you're talking about. A lot of people won't understand. They'll think it's alien. Yeah, when you're talking about the Panj Pyare, they see the Panj Pyare of just giving Amrit. They don't see the Panj Pyare as being all, what it means to be the Panj Pyare, to have the wisdom, to have the knowledge, but also to make the right decisions,
today's society, we question the Panch Pyare. We say that, oh, Panch Pyare in the bitch, he shouldn't be a Panch Pyare. We say that. People say that. So the challenge is who are the right Panch Pyare within one community in Birmingham, one community in Bradford, somewhere else, or do we have a super Panch Pyare for the whole of the UK? Then do we have an international Panch Pyare? So there's a lot of questions to be fleshed out over all of this. It's easy to talk about it, but really what we should be doing is creating a group of people that really can create a system that firstly can work and is based on some good practices, right? And going back to our own principles. So Gurnwara Singh's talking about vision, values, principles, all those kind of things. Every organisation has them. We talk about them all the time. And I work for an organisation. They have a very good corporate responsibility. I work in an industry where I have to have integrity and honesty. And I practice it in everything I do every day. So I'm very fortunate in what I do. I don't have any moral kind of issues with what I do. But he talks about digital forensics. We have a digital forensics part of the business, so we go and do fraud investigations, we do all that. So by me working in that industry, I can't go and work with people that are not doing things in that manner. It's against what I believe in.
It's mutually exclusive.
Yeah. So what I think is that we all need to understand being a proper Sikh, what that means morally, and also how should I be acting and behaving.
I find that Gurdwara are reluctant to actually educate their youth for that. Well, maybe that's precisely one of their reasons, is they feel threatened by an educated populace. It's much like you might say, they say about Marx used to say that religion is the opium of the masses. He didn't mean opium of the masses in the sense that religion was itself the problem, but religion meant that you didn't question, right? So people stayed dull and stayed unquestioning, and that is maybe ignorance, amongst our youth and amongst our people is actually fueling this. Because if people knew what a Gurdwara is supposed to deliver, or they knew actually what Sikhi said, like I recently, I see you were there at the Panth time in Hansa Gurdwara recently, and the question was raised about courses and how we should be educating our youth. And I raised this specific issue that I'd come to that Gurdwara 6 months ago with a course that I'd made, 12-week course. And without even looking at the material or the testimonies of the people which I had there on the document and what the material was, I said it was all going to be online. They dismissed it. And yet this is the same Gurdwara that was then standing up and talking about actually teaching couples about education. And I said, how seriously can we take this commitment you just talked about when you haven't even been able to walk? So if somebody comes to you for free, you've been totally ignorant of that. And the other thing, sorry, just in that same part time where you were presiding over, people were talking then about. So I've lost my point now.
Can I just put up the
last
point? Really
now.
important point. The thing is, you've got to know the issue, which is about how we select the committee. And I think there are some red herrings here. I think the Panch Pyare issue is a red herring. I'll tell you why. Because ultimately you have to have a system to elect the Panch Pyare. So you don't solve the problem. You're just going to put the problem to the next stage. And if you want evidence of that, look at what's happening in Amritsar. We have the Jathedars of the Takhts, and still we have these problems. So I think that's a bit of a red herring. I think that we need to connect this with, again, the earlier observation about what's happening to hierarchical systems, whether they are hierarchical systems running banks, or countries even, and how those individuals with lots and lots of power destroy, later waste countries and industries. And you said that people are turning away from having powerful people running the show. And what's happening in South America, and this came out of the Zapatista movements in South America, and those were movements against fascist dictatorships in South America, was that they said that we don't want people running the show for us, we want to run it for ourselves. And they developed a system of what was called consensus systems, yeah? So you sit down, and you get all the people who are interested, who it affects, and you do not decide until everybody, or the vast majority of people, say, yes, we'll go with this, and even the ones that don't agree say, okay, I will support it. It's a consensus building system, it's from ground up, yeah? And I think that that's the kind of system we need to. So what we need in Jathedars or Panchkaris or whatever are facilitators. That's what we need. We don't need, and if you remember the Sabbath Khalsa concept, that the Jathedars were the first amongst equals, always. And if the Jathedar, if you remember Kalifullah Singh, even he pulled Maharaji Singh down. And so this is the way forward, is to, and a great example that we've had in the last year in Sikhi is the KC-led movement. The phenomenal power of the KC-led movement is because it hasn't got a leader. It's just got people who share that vision and share that passion and share that concern. And you know, people like Kartat, people just appear. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And this is where we've got to get back to.
Okay, guys, we're going to have to finish at that point. I just want to finish again to say that this is a level of awareness that needs to be built, right? And I'd like to come and do that in your towns, cities. There's no charge, right? There's no invoice or receipts or anything involved. I'm quite happy to devote my time, come and talk about this and get this debate going. And I just want to finish again by thanking the Sikh Society for being brave enough to host this discussion, and the chaplaincy, and I should have mentioned at the beginning the Sikh channel as well, who are covering this event. So I'd like to thank you guys as well. Thank you very much.